Uneducated, unfiltered, unhinged. This is the Mangina Dialogues. We at it again with your host Nick Scopes and the Gregolicious. You know how we do, cause you know we keeping it gangster and silly. Unplugged like a full swung titty. Bout get jitty, cause you know we down to the nitty and the gritty. And we make shit sound so damn pretty. Yeah, cause this unhinged comedy. And right now you're in the mix, so get ready, cause we about to get it poppin'. And we ain't stopping.
Hello and welcome to the Mangina Dialogues. I am your host, Nick Scopes.
And I'm the Gregolicious.
And today, switching it up, it's actually not a comedian today, guys. It's a world-renowned photographer, Mark WEISSGUY Weiss. What's up, my man?
Hey, how you doing, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for spending the time with us today. Sorry to make you sit through that song. It's clearly not your wheelhouse.
Actually.
Do you really?
Yeah, good beat.
Hell yeah.
Well, we got one.
That's a win for today.
Yeah, that's a big win for us today, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right, what do I get? Do I get a prize?
Yeah, we'll figure out what the prize is by the end of the half hour.
Okay, sounds good.
How are you doing? How are you spending this massive amounts of free time where you can't go shoot anything on stage or get in front of live people?
Yeah, well, I definitely miss that, but I'd probably be sitting here doing exactly the same thing, because, I was working on my book, believe it or not, for so many years. And then I thought I'd be able to just kind of relax after that, but then I forgot that it's time to promote and try to get it out there and let everyone know about it. So sitting in front of my computer again, just reaching out to people like you to, help spread the word. So really, it's where I'd be anyway, aside from, shooting shows as well. I mean, I did have some ideas to travel around with some of the concerts that's happening this summer and like maybe go in the day before and set up a gallery and do some charitable event, and then maybe go on some radio stations and promote the tour and my book and like tie it together. So right. I was just starting to get like that. So I was planning on by June, when the release of the book is, to get in like a Winnebago with my girlfriend and just like travel the country. So that kind of sucks. It's like, but next year.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. So the book comes out when?
It comes out June 2nd.
June 2nd.
June 2nd, yeah.
And available, can you buy it in the bookstores, or is it on Amazon? Like, where do people go to buy it?
Well, pre-order right now is on Amazon. It's been on Amazon for a couple of weeks, and it's been number one on a lot of different charts. It's like there's so many different charts on Amazon and books. It's got history and celebrity photography and heavy metal photography, but it's like it's been doing pretty good on that. And yeah, on June 2nd, that's when they ship it out, and then Simon & Schuster is distributing it, so it's going to be everywhere, and then there's all these other, mom and pop bookstores that, that pre-order it, the team at Inside Editions, who actually, published the book, they go to the book fairs, and they sell them to different countries and different territories, and, that's what they do. And they start the marketing. But, Simon & Schuster makes sure it gets in all the Barnes & Nobles and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from seeing the preview that you sent us, I mean, I have to tell you, it's an amazing, amazing book. I mean, the pictures they're just incredible. And, for someone like myself who grew up in, the 80s rock world, there's just so many memories that I flipped through that. Well, PDF, and hopefully I'll get the book eventually, that I just remember seeing on my wall from Hit Parader and Circus and all the magazines that I bought, every single month, couldn't wait for them to come out, and litter my walls with what now would be considered a little bit of a strange, decor for a teenage boy, to have David Lee Roth and Tommy Lee and everybody in like super tight tights, just in the biggest possible way on their walls. But I mean, the photos are so iconic, and just flipping through it brought back so many memories.
Thanks. I mean, that's the idea. I mean, everyone, we miss those times with the magazines. You put them out there. Feel bad for the kids that, they don't have anything to rip out and stick it on their walls, So One of the things I am including in a special like little package on my website in a bundle where I'm making centerfolds again. So pictures that aren't in the book actually, but they're kind of like the same size as a regular centerfold. And I have a Lita Ford one and a Vince Neil one. And I'm going to do a series of them because I always loved that. And actually, the very first photo I ever got in Circus magazine was in 1978 of Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. And that was my centerfold. It was like my first picture in the magazine, and it was the biggest picture in the book. So centerfolds have a special meaning to me.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Certainly for kids out of that era, even the girls that bought Tiger Beats and those magazines, they did the same thing, just with David Cassidy.
Well, heavy metal and all the hard rock bands and the hair bands, whatever you want to call them, like they were like that's what the teen magazines were. They turned into it, you know. So they kind of segued it out of the David Cassidys into rock and hard rock and heavy metal, and all those magazines with the pinups. I mean,
right.
It was definitely the same publishers that saw something was going on, and that's what they did.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. Do you still have any of those magazines? I imagine you must have boxes full of them.
Oh yeah, I have a double car garage, and I have tons of boxes of them, and because I used to get them from the magazines, used to get extras, and I said, one day I'll pull them out and start looking at them, and maybe recreating another room. That's what I always wanted to do, is create a 80s room, and actually I did a promo shot of my girlfriend, Michelle, and I kind of recreated my real bedroom with all my posters and album covers, and we did a little 80s, dress up on her.
That's
and
cool.
It was, it was definitely fun thing. It reminded me back from the days.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty awesome.
Now, Mark, how'd you get the nickname WEISSGUY? Who gave you that?
Oh, yeah. So, well, in high school, in grammar school, like I used to play little jokes and stuff. So, like they used to call me the Weiss guy because I was like always kidding around, and I'd have the typical dollar on the floor and with the the fishing string, and I'd have the fart machine or something, So I would do that, and then it kind of faded off, when I went into the real world, and then the name kind of got lost, and then I started hanging out with Mötley Crüe when they went on tour with Ozzy in '84. I mean, I first shot him in '82, but in '84, like I was on tour with Ozzy doing his photos, and he had so many different opening bands, and whoever they were, they ended up being huge. So I would end up hanging out with them, taking pictures, and with Mötley, they asked me to go on the bus one time, and I did. And there was a couple things that happened on the bus. And one of the things was, we got drunk and did shit, and at 3 a.m, me and Mick were watching the Three Stooges, and one of the lines is, "Hey, he's a Weiss guy," knucklehead, So he started calling me Weiss guy, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's what they used to call me in high school." And then that spread in the magazine. I just put my name as a little, joke and put it in quotes, Weiss guy, and then it just stuck. So then, every time I went on the road with Crüe, and then I guess other bands would see it in the magazine, Weiss guy, then they would call me Weiss guy, and 40 years later, or 30 years later, I would name my kid Guy Weiss, so he's the real Weiss guy.
That's a pretty awesome story.
That is awesome.
So how did you get into photography? So were you like a novice photographer in high school or just growing up as a kid, and then you just sort of parlayed it into a career? Did it happen? Like, was it intentional? Did it just happen? Like, what got you into photography and then as a profession?
Well, it really just happened very, just, I was mowing lawns. I was a 12-year-old kid mowing lawns, making $5 a cut. And then one guy his lawn was really high, and I knocked on his door, and I said, you need your lawn cut?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, it looks like you do because it was really long." And he kind of like, chuckled and, he said, "I do it," because he said he did it himself, but, obviously he waited a little bit too much. And he's like, "I tell you what," and he came back like a couple minutes later with his camera, and he goes, "If you mow my lawn for the season, I'll give you this camera." It was a Bell and Howell Canon camera, and it looked like it was worth $1 million. I was like, "Okay, no, sure." I had no interest at the time in cameras, nor did anyone in my family, or never, just aside from the little, Instamatic camera and Polaroid, that was it, So I got the camera after, cutting his lawn for a few times. And then I just started taking pictures of my brother and my dog and my friends and family. And I kind of enjoyed taking pictures. And then, I was in 8th grade, and my teacher, that there was a class with photography, and I said, "How do I develop this?" I asked him, and he gave me a summer lesson on how to develop film, and it was really fascinating to me. Putting in a blank piece of paper, and all of a sudden there's an image on it. With some developer, and then you put fixer and stop path and all that. And so that just that whole process kind of amazed me, and I kind of did that for like maybe a year until I got bored of it. And I put it down, and then I started going to concerts, when I was, 14, maybe a couple years later. And, one of my friends, my parents' friend's kid was at a concert, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and he had his camera, and he had these 2 hot girls on his side. And I was at the concert too, just hanging out. And I saw him with his camera and these 2 girls. I said, "Where are you going?" He's like, "I'm going to the front of the stage to take pictures." And that kind of had a lasting impression on me. And then I think a month later, when I went over to their house, he showed me the pictures, and he told me, it was just amazing. It's like, so the next time I did it, I snuck into the concert with my cameras, and I, shot a couple shows, and just kind of got excited from there.
And what was your first paying music job?
Well, so I did that, let's see, when I was like 14, 15. Then, like when I was 15, 16, I started selling my pictures for $1 a piece in front of Madison Square Garden, right, and different concert venues. So when Kiss was playing at the Garden, I got arrested for selling my pictures. So I went to jail overnight in the paddy wagon with all the bootleggers the shirt sellers and everything. And then the next day I was like, all right, now what am I going to do? So it's like, so I went to the magazine I used to read when I was a kid, and still to that day, I was only 17, and I went to Circus Magazine. They had an office in New York City, and it was just good timing, like the secretary took a liking to me and said, hang out, I told her what happened, with the Kiss. I got arrested. And so she said, "Why don't you wait until the art director's off deadline, which will be in a couple hours, and I'll send him to him, and he can talk to you." So I said, "All right." I waited like 3-4 hours patiently, and I went and met with him. And the publisher of the magazine came in, Jerry Rothberg, and he said hi to me. He was very nice, and they liked what I did, and they said, we need you to use Kodachrome film instead of the Ektachrome, and use a flash when you can. So they gave me a couple tips to come by, and then maybe like 4 or 5 months later, the secretary called me up and said, "Do you have any pictures of Aerosmith? Because they're not letting anyone shoot them." And I did happen to have just shot Aerosmith at Giant Stadium with Ted Nugent, and I had some really good pictures. There was during the day, it was a daylight show, and I stuck my camera in and I dropped them off. And then I think 2 months later, she told me to go to the newsstand and check out Circus Magazine. And I went there. The Beatles were on the cover, and there was a centerfold of Steven Tyler in the centerfold. And then from there on out, every month that went by, they used a picture here of Ted Nugent, a picture there of Aerosmith, and then I started submitting pictures, and then eventually it led on to assignments, one being Van Halen, 1979, Convention Hall, and there was another centerfold, and then the kind of ball started getting rolling, and then I started meeting the bands, and I started getting along with them, and they were getting along with me. They liked the way I shot, and I showed them the pictures, and just built up the relationships, and it just took off like a wildfire.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Did they pay you for that first Aerosmith shot?
Oh yeah, I got paid $125.
Well, that's not bad for 17-year-old in 1970 whatever.
Yeah, no doubt.
Better than my first paying job.
Yeah.
What was your?
I mean, eventually.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Eventually, like I would get like space rate, but then they said, we want to send you on assignment, but we're going to pay you like $125, but we own everything. And I was like, whatever, they get me now I have photo passes. So I'm like, I didn't care. I just wanted to build a name for myself.
Right.
So they paid for expenses, and they gave me $125. And then for them, they would use my photos a lot because they wouldn't have to pay the other photographers that were just submitting pictures. So they would get their money's worth. And, so they technically owned it. And actually when they folded, Jerry, Rothberg was nice enough to tell me to come by when they were folding. The magazine folded in the 90s. They said, if you want to pick up your photos, you can. So I have all those, those pictures that I were on assignment from them.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was good.
So do you have any favorite year? Your book is by year, basically from 80, right? From 80 to 90?
Right.
So do you have any in one particular year that really stands out for you?
You know what? I never really. I got this book. I'm looking at it right now, and I got it a few weeks ago. And I spent so much time working on it, and I didn't really study it yet because I was so like enthralled in it for all these years. So I've been working on this for over 5 years.
Wow.
And it's different designers, different writers, and I don't know. Every year I'm looking at it right now. I don't know if I have a favorite year because they're all my favorites. You know?
Yeah, when I was looking through it, it's pretty. What I found, humorous is that as you start in the beginning of the book, you see the gradual change of style and fashion up until the dramatic change in the early 90s, right? So you can sort of see that progression very clear, like when you flip through like a picture book, how it so rapidly changes. But when you're in that time, there's no way you could see that, like really feel that change. So I got a kick out of that. I think there was one particular picture of maybe Bon Jovi from like the mid 80s, and then one in the 90s, like the 90s section. I could be confusing it with something else, but I was like, wow, that's a striking difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, the book, I call it a vision. It was like I don't know. I feel like I had a lot to do with the visual imagery of the 80s, and I went with it and helped create it. And it is kind of like a history book in a way. It's actually, Amazon has a chart called History and something else. It's called History. And I'm like, the book is number one on there, along with books by Bach and these other artists that, so it is a historic piece of literature, I guess you could call it, and it really is interesting how you see these, the times changing and, with the hair or without the hair. But yeah, it's I don't know if I have a favorite era. I guess 84, 85, 86 is when I started doing a lot of album covers. So I did Stay Hungry with Twisted Sister. That was my first album cover.
One of the best.
Thanks. And then The Last Command and Cinderella, Night Songs, and Dock and Under Lock and Key. I mean, looking at them now, it's like glam rock at its finest. They're kind of the album covers are larger than life. You'll never see anyone dressed like that again.
No, that's
maybe not for a while.
Did you do the Poison album cover?
No, I did not do the Poison album cover. I did the back cover for Flesh and Blood in '90.
Right.
I did that.
I was just curious because I know I saw that in the book. I can't remember which I saw. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing, like flipping through and hearing all those. I mean, I owned every one of those on vinyl or a cassette, but definitely vinyl and then CD. They're just major pieces of my musical history. And, it really is amazing to talk to the person that actually shot those album covers. I mean, I remember Stay Hungry like it was yesterday, right? Like I had that probably on 10 different things from t-shirts, bootleg t-shirts, like real t-shirts. I mean, posters out. I mean, every single possible way that album cover was put on something. I had it on everything I had. Like, I mean,
he was the poster child, for all this. And, I went with him to the PMRC hearings in Washington, D.C., and he wore, one of my photos on his shirt, a picture of him,
Yeah.
But, he took me, in those short couple of years with Twisted, I was their guy, and, I did the Come Out and Play album cover. I art directed it as well. And the Stay Hungry album really, it was a game changer for me, because once the success of that image and the amount of records they sold, the record companies were like, all right, who shot that? And then I was part of this formula. Wayne Isham did the videos and Marty Kolner, and I would do the photos. So it was like, that's when my business started coming up to another level.
Now, my question for both of you, I guess it's for both of you guys, because I was born in 1988. Okay. So I came around to all this music later in life, but I find it fascinating to look back, like you said, the glam rock thing. Like, when did the times change from when, like, these guys were in full blown makeup and hairspray and almost looked like women, but yet women were like, oh my God. Like, so, because nowadays, let's face it, that is not the case. So how did this happen, basically, is my question. Like, what led into that? I don't even know.
Well, my theory is it's really glam rock from the 70s with like T-Rex and Bowie and the Sweet. I mean, those were really, they were glammed out more than the 80s. The 80s were a version of a cross between like Led Zeppelin, because Robert Plant had great hair, and they all had great hair, but not they had to put hairspray in. They just had a lot of good hair, and they wore the tight clothes. So I think the 80s bands like wanted they wanted a little bit of both, the Zeppelin coolness, and then the Bowie T-Rex kind of glammy, and they kind of mixed it all together. It's kind of like the 80s were like a fine-tuned rock star, and then they had the MTV and then the record company started putting all the money into it because they knew it was all about visuals. So now what the 80s had that the 70s didn't was MTV.
Right.
So now they got all this extra money for videos and photo shoots, and where they knew they had to outdo the next one. So it really polished it. And it at the time, it didn't seem weird, I mean, I look at it now, and the Under Lock and Key album with Dawkins, where they had the 4 suits on different colors, that's where it got a little too out of control, and that was the epitome of that style, but everyone after Mötley started with like theatrical, then they went a little kind of, then Poison came around in 85. They were just starting out kind of, but they were the first ones to really glam it up. And the word on the street was that they were going to be the next biggies, So then, then other bands started glamming out a little bit, obviously, Theater of Pain was a glam time for Mötley. And all these other bands, they all kind of glammed it up a little bit. And then as soon as Guns N' Roses came out, Guns N' Roses, they came out glammy too in '86. In my book, there's the hair really high, but they as soon as that came out, they changed into their hair went straight, bandanas, a little more leather and denim. And then the other bands, everyone followed that. I mean, not everybody. I mean, Warrant at the end of the decade, they were full glammed up. They kept it going, and they were selling records too. And then things changed.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, exactly. Really, exactly. You nailed it. But I think the other part to it too is you had even like Freddie Mercury from Queen in the early to mid '80s was already full blown, like glammed out, but more in a pop rock sense. But you had Plant, Freddie Mercury, obviously Bowie, T-Rex from the '70s, even David Johansen, and then it just morphed into everything that the mid '80s was. I think it kind of started with Randy Rhoads wearing all that crazy tight stuff as a rock and roll guitar player. You didn't really see that on the back, behind the front man. That was usually the front guy, but then Randy brought it to the band.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And Van Halen too, of course.
Right.
Yeah, Van Halen were kind of leaders of that. But all Van Halen did was they had spandex. They had tight spandex.
Yeah.
And so they were like Led Zeppelin with a little bit of they weren't over the top yet. But they never really were over the top as far as the look.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you saw it firsthand in a much different way than I did. I kind of grew up on both coasts, New York, outside of New York City and then Los Angeles. So I sort of lived the New York City, like 80s metal thing, and then simultaneously the LA scene, which was considerably different from what was East Coast to West Coast, right? You had the glam was really built in California.
For sure.
And then, I mean, with the exception of Twisted Sister, of course. But I saw it from both sides. And when I would come back home to New York from LA, I'm like trying to describe to my friends what I'm seeing and what these bands are. And they're not able to see it through my eyes until it truly exploded, which I think that was Mötley Crüe. I think Crüe really blew that up. And then shortly thereafter, in the second part of the 80s, whatever you said, 85, 86, and then Poison was full on. Like full on makeup, big hair, looked like girls. And Rat also. They we look at Robin Crosby from 1986, 85. I mean, he's a very pretty woman.
They had this pirate. They even used to call them cement pirates. They were actually influenced by Duran Duran. Believe it or not, So they were a little bit different, but they were like a glammy pirate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure. So do you, there's a handful of great photographers that, sort of are from the same era, right? So, I'm friendly, used to be friendly, well, not so much anymore, but was friendly with Mark Cantor from LA, who was, tons of GNR stuff.
Right.
Jack Lew, Zlaz, I did a little work with him for a while. So were all of you guys like friendly? Because it seemed like you all were shooting virtually in the same place at the same time. Little crossovers age wise with some of the guys. And
no, well, yeah, I know. Yeah, well, I feel every decade had like three like photographers that kind of like made a statement.
Right.
And I feel like in the '60s it was like Henry Diltz. Henry Diltz, Jim Marshall, and skips me. But anyway, in the '70s, I feel it was like Mick Rock, Bob Gruen, and Lynn Goldsmith, and really in the '80s, there's three of us, and it was me, and it was Ross Halfin in England, and then it was Niels Lozauer on the West Coast. It was really, it was the three. There was a lot of people shooting as well, like the ones you mentioned, but no one really took it to the level where we made it to, and there was this competition, I felt so anyway, because if one of the bands would be doing a video shoot, you'd want the exclusive on it, and because you can sell the pictures as an exclusive to a magazine and whatnot, and you want to be the only one on there taking those photos. And of course, when the album cover comes out, I was known for album covers. Those guys did them too, but I don't think they did as many.
Right.
But yeah, it was creative
Competition.
competition. Yeah. And like I think we became more friendly as the decades went on. Like once the 80s were done, it's like there's still something, but it's like everything else. It made you work harder. It made you do more things. And I was from New Jersey, and everything was happening in LA, so I was like stepping on other areas. Like New York, things weren't really happening like they were in LA, and I wanted to be out there. So, and I was the youngest out of all of them, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all good. We're all cordial now. We hang out. We see each other on. There was this Monster of the Rock cruise, and Niels Lozauer is kind of retired from it. We're all selling our material.
Yeah.
But I still love shooting. I still shoot bands that aren't as big and are as big or bigger, but I just developed all these relationships back from a great time, and I'll take it to, I'll take those relationships till we're old men.
Right. Yeah.
Were there, this is probably going to be nearly impossible for you to narrow down because you've seen so many great artists and got to hang out with these guys and take photos of them, but is there like maybe a particular song that you hear and it just takes you right back and you're like, oh, I saw this live here, I was shooting, the crowd was going nuts? Is there anything like that in your brain? Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, and I got to figure out what page it's on because I always refer to this. Like in the early years, I have like the first maybe 20 pages are dedicated to my early years, how I got where I am, and some personal things that happened, and why I did certain things. And one thing that happened to me when I was like 12 years old is I had a motorcycle accident, and I had a head-on collision with my friend, and I kind of joggled my brain a bit, and I just don't remember anything before that, And I didn't realize it until I was in high school that my memory really doesn't remember things. So a lot of the stuff in the book, I really had to jog my memory and rely on interviews with the rock stars that I shot to tell the stories. And then I kind of read it and then try to remember it, and then started remembering, and so remembering things. What song? Everything seems like it happened yesterday. Huh. So, because I still listen to the same music, but it doesn't seem like it's been 30 or 40 years. It seems like it's been a few years, and then, time has kind of stopped in that decade for me. It doesn't. It looks. See, I feel like I took these pictures yesterday. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I feel like I saw them yesterday.
Yeah.
How did you land on that GNR picture for the cover?
Oh, okay. Well, I was looking for a picture on the cover. I didn't want it to be a multiple image cover. I wanted it to be, one band that's, that just says it. And I just felt like, I didn't say it had to be Guns N' Roses or Mötley or Ozzy. I just saw that photo and I just felt like, that band and the photo represented that decade, Yeah. And it's the slipcover, I never liked slipcovers, I know you have to have them on. It has about the author on there and all that. But whenever I used to buy a book, I used to just take them out and just, put them in the back room. I didn't like the way they felt. You feel like you're going to mess them up or something. I always like the feeling of the book on its own. And if you take the slipcover off, it's just going to say the decade that rocked, 1980 to 1990. And it's very silvery kind of look to it. And it's just, so, my plan was, it still is on the next pressing, I'm going to have another band on the cover. So
that's cool.
It's going to be maybe Mötley Crüe on one, or Ozzy on another, or Bon Jovi on another, depending on how many pressings there are. So, each pressing will be like a collectible.
Right. Do you have a favorite photo in the whole book?
Uh,
I mean, I know that's an impossible question.
Yeah, I would say the Ozzy and the Tutu, because that was really, that was one of my first covers in Circus Magazine, and we got a lot of attention from that, and it was kind of the beginning of a really amazing relationship with the family, so that brings back a lot of memories, and still making today with them. They just Ozzy just had a release party in LA, and Sharon asked me to decorate the rainbow where they were having the party.
Oh,
And
wow.
this is like 3 days before the party, and I'm like, well, so I said, of course, and I printed up some canvas on the canvas, because I can roll it up. It'd be easy to put it up, and we did it. And that was like in January when they had the release party there.
Right.
So and then we have Ozzy sign them, and then I donate the money to charity.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm flipping through it now, and there's no, if you ask me to tell you my favorite picture in the book, there's no possible way I could. There's no way. I mean, it might default to a Van Halen photo, but I mean, there's so many amazing pictures.
Thank you.
It's incredible.
Now, out of the newer bands, more modern bands that you've shot, who do you really like? Like, who's one of your faves?
I don't even know who modern bands are.
Yeah, me neither. I don't even know what that means.
Like,
I mean, like, they're active, I guess, right now. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like Mötley Crüe in the 80s. It's more the guys now. I don't really know who it is now.
You mean like the bands that I shot back then, or like new bands that I probably never heard of?
New bands that you shot, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really shoot new bands, so I don't even know what's going on out there, I shot Machine Gun Kelly. He was awesome, he's very visual. He's a rocker too,
Right.
I met him through a friend, and we got along, so I shot him a bunch of times. I don't really know. I mean, I don't really go after. I mean, I'll shoot anybody. I shoot a lot of local bands, because they track me down and they say, "Hey, will you shoot my band?" And I said, "All right, come over my house, and I'll shoot you for an hour." And and that's it. There's so many bands right now, and I couldn't even tell you. Like in the 80's, there wasn't so many bands. It's like there was, the record company would push a handful of bands, because the only way to push them is through the magazines and getting the photographer. Now there's so many bands that are making careers out of it, because they can self-promote themselves on YouTube and travel through, they can do, tours throughout the country, because they're their own company, and they can push it. But the only way to know about them is if you surf and, you hear about them somewhere. It's not like all in one. When there was a rock show in the 80's, they would go to the record store, they'd be on the radio, and you'd have no choice. So that's what you listen to. Now it's just like insane. I mean, I like bands with image, so there's tons out there, but they're not crossing my screen.
Do you still shoot live?
Yeah, I love shooting live. Yeah, I mean, I developed a website called rockscenemagazine.com, and I've been, for the last 10 years, I've been doing, because there's no magazines anymore. Rockscene was the magazine that I used to work for in the 70's, very short time at the end of the decade, and they went out. They went out of business, and I took over the trademark and developed this magazine, online magazine, and kind of paying homage to that magazine by putting all the old magazines on, and then just kind of being true to the magazine, and just posting photos that I've taken that I like, whether it's a classic rock band or a heavy metal band or just anyone that I wanted to shoot. It would give me a place to to do a layout and put it online. So it's all online. And then I also do interviews. I have over 100 interviews of them talking about their rock scene. So these interviews are the artists talking about like their humble beginnings when they grew up,
right.
up until they got, you know, famous or their big break. So I've just enjoyed doing it. And so I have it there now and I keep working on it, and you know, it looks pretty cool. I don't have a million visitors and I don't do it for anyone. I just do it for myself. And then, you know, it's just a way I can, it's like my hobby, and, you know, if it's a way to monetize it down the road, that's great, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it to self-satisfy me and showing my work off instead of just posting a photo here and there on Facebook or Instagram. Here, it's like, you know, I'll shoot a show and I'll take the best photos and I'll put a ton of them up. And whoever wants to grab them and put them on their page, they can. And then obviously now I'm promoting something, so I'm going to tie it all together.
Right.
And, you know, and then, you know, and I just created another, you know, I mean, I'm, you know, a lot of people know who I am from the 80s, but the kids today don't really know who I am or anything. So I felt, you know, I have my Instagram and my social media, but I just created a new social platform called The Decade That Rocked. It's basically anything that happened from 1980 to 1990, and it will include not just my photos, but album covers, and I do some special things, and you know, it's revolving around my photos,
right?
But it doesn't have my name on it, so it's like it's a generic brand where, you know, kids and of all ages will go to. It's not like, you know, they need to see Mark Weiss, the photographer, you know, like they'll always have people that are interested in me as a photographer, but I want to reach a broader, you know, range, and just have people go to this site and enjoy what's there. And it doesn't matter who, you know, that it's me, the photographer. Yeah. You know, they'll get it eventually. And then of course, you know, hopefully they buy the book. I mean, that's the bottom line, but yeah, on all socials, it's The Decade That Rocked. It's at The Decade That Rocked is Instagram. It's at the Decade That Rocked on Facebook, and my Twitter is always just Mark WEISSGUY, and also Mark WEISSGUY is my my IG too as well. Right. So you know, I'm just trying to tie everything together.
Yeah, man. Listen, this was a great time for me, especially. I could do this for 45 more hours. But listen, really wanted. You know, thank you for taking the time to talk to us and talk about The Decade That Rocked, more so than just the book, but every single thing about that. Really appreciate it. This was an awesome time to just talk about some great memories. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to get the hardcover of this book.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, man. We'll definitely keep in touch and talk soon. Most of all, stay healthy.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Brother.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Bye, Mark.
All right. Bye-bye. See ya.